What would you do if you really wanted intimacy and decided to take off the steam? But at that moment, your little brother came into your room and caught you in the middle of the act. Now you will find out what I did. My name's Tiffany, I'm 22, and this all happened just a couple of weeks ago when I went home for fall break. To give some context, I hadn't been home in over 2 years because I've been studying abroad on another continent. But finally, the stars aligned and I booked a ticket back. It was so emotional with my parent, just the overwhelming feeling of being home again after so long. And then Jason showed up. Jason's my little brother. We grew up together, so we'd always been around each other. He was a bit younger than me. A gangly, awkward kid back then. He was practically my shadow when we were younger, always tagging along. But now, oh boy. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. The skinny, shy boy I used to know had grown into a 6-foot-something, broad-shouldered guy with this quiet confidence about him. He looked like he just stepped out of one of those glow-up Instagram or something in tight black shirt. I hugged him, and I could actually feel the muscle in his back. It was surreal. "You grew up," I said, pulling back, genuinely shocked. He just laughed, scratching the back of his neck. Yeah, it happens. It wasn't just how he looked, he smelled amazing. I don't know if it was cologne or just him, but it caught me off guard. For the rest of the evening, I kept catching myself looking over at him, noticing little things I never had before. His laugh was deeper, his eyes held this calm energy. It was like meeting someone new. And yet, I'd known him my whole life. All right, let me just get straight to the point. That first night back, after all the hugs, catching up, and stuffing my face with my mom's famous lasagna, I was completely wiped out. Traveling for over 18 hours with layovers and delays had drained every ounce of energy from me. So after we all finally said goodnight, I went upstairs to shower and just crash in my old room. Now here's the thing, my old room. It was still pretty much the same as I left it. My parents had turned parts of it into a guest room, but they left all my posters, my bookshelf full of yay novels, and even some of my high school stuff lying around. It was like stepping into a time capsule. Nostalgia hit me hard, but honestly, all I wanted was to crawl into bed and pass out. So I took a shower, letting the hot water wash away the stiffness from the plane ride. It felt incredible, like the first real moment of peace I'd had in weeks. Once I was done, I threw on an oversized t-shirt, turned off the lights, and slid under the blankets in my room. It was cool, cozy, and so quiet, the kind of quiet that only your childhood home can give you. Now, I don't know if it was the jet lag, the stress of school melting away, or maybe the way Jason had popped back into my life, looking like that. But as I laid there in the dark, my mind started to wander. And honestly, it had been a long time since I'd had any kind of intimacy. Like a really long time. Between school, work, and life in general, I just hadn't had the time, or honestly, the energy, to connect with anyone in that way. So I figured, why not take a little time for myself? I mean, I was alone, the house was silent, and it just felt like the perfect moment to relax. I closed my eyes and let my hands wander, just brushing them over my skin to start. The sensation was soft, comforting, like a way of reconnecting with myself. My fingertips grazed my lips, then my neck, and I felt this warmth building inside me. My mind, though, it betrayed me. Because out of nowhere, Jason's face flashed in my thoughts. It wasn't like I planned it. But there he was, his sharp jawline, the way his hair looked slightly messy, that quiet confidence he carried now. I felt this heat in my chest, and then lower, spreading through me like a wildfire. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my brain being weird, because I hadn't seen him in years. But the thought lingered, and the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it got. I kept imagining him, how different he looked now, how his deep laugh had this edge to it. I pictured the way he hugged me earlier, how solid he felt under my hands. And before I knew it, I stopped trying to fight the thought. I let it in. I ran my fingers lower, letting myself get lost in the warmth that was building. My breathing started to change, shallow and quick, as I sank deeper into the moment. The room felt even quieter, like the whole world had faded away except for me, and this intense feeling growing inside me. And then there he was again in my mind, Jason. This time, I didn't try to stop it. I imagined his hands, strong and sure, brushing against my skin. His voice, low and teasing, saying my name. It felt so vivid, like he was there with me, and I couldn't help but lean into the fantasy. My body reacted instantly. The way my fingers moved, the way my body arched, it all felt electric. Every nerve in my body was alive, and the warmth I felt earlier turned into something I couldn't ignore. It was this perfect mix of comfort and excitement, like I was experiencing something new but safe at the same time. And let me just say, it wasn't just physical. There was this emotional intensity to it too. Maybe it was the fact that Jason had been such a big part of my life growing up. Or maybe it was the shock of seeing him again after so long, looking and acting like a completely different person. Whatever it was, it felt powerful. I let myself go completely, surrendering to the moment. My hands moved with more confidence, and my breathing grew heavier. Jason's image in my head became clearer, his hands on my waist, his lips brushing against my ear. It was forbidden, sure. I mean, this was Jason, the kid I used to babysit when I was 14. But that's what made it even more intense. It felt so wrong, but at the same time, it felt like something I couldn't resist. The memory of his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, it all came rushing back to me. But now it was layered with this new attraction that I didn't know how to handle. The room was dim, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside my window. The air felt thick, almost charged, as I let my thoughts spiral deeper. Every touch sent shivers through me, and every thought of him made my heart race faster. But just as I was completely lost in the moment, something inside me hesitated. A tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered, "What are you doing?" "This is Jason." It was like a splash of cold water, and for a brief moment, I paused. I opened my eyes, staring up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. But then, as quickly as the hesitation came, it faded. I told myself it was just a fantasy, just a way to unwind after a long day. No harm, no foul, right? So I closed my eyes again, letting myself fall back into that warm, electric haze. My fingers moved with a purpose now, and I let the fantasy take over completely. This time, there was no hesitation. Just the sound of my breathing, the softness of the blankets around me, and the vivid image of Jason in my mind. I imagined everything. The way his hands would feel, big and warm, but with that roughness you get when someone works out a lot. I thought about his voice, low and teasing, calling my name in this way that would send shivers up my spine. And his eyes. Man, I couldn't get his eyes out of my mind. They were this mix of mischievous and calm, like he always had some secret he wasn't sharing. And that was the thing. It felt forbidden, like I was crossing some invisible line, but that only made it more intense. My body was fully in tune with the moment. My breathing was heavy, and I was so close to, well, you know. And then it happened. Out of absolutely nowhere, the door to my room flew open. Like bam. No knock, no warning, just this loud crash of the door slamming into the wall. "Tiffany." Jason's voice cut through the air like a slap. "Let's go get drunk." I froze, like fully froze. My entire body tensed up, my brain short-circuited, and I was just lying there like a deer in headlights. And Jason, oh my God, He was just standing there. His eyes went wide as plates as he realized what he'd walked in on. The silence was deafening. I could see the exact moment his brain caught up with what was happening. His jaw dropped, his face turned bright red, and he just stood there completely frozen. He didn't even try to look away. He was just staring, his mouth slightly open, like his entire system had crashed. And me. I was still lying there like an idiot, completely exposed. Not physically, but emotionally, which somehow felt even worse. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was like my brain refused to process the situation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the gears in my head started turning again. "Jason." "What the hell?" I shouted, my voice coming out way louder than I intended. He snapped out of it, blinking rapidly. I didn't know. You never lock your door." I fired back, sitting up and grabbing a pillow to cover myself, even though I was fully dressed. My heart was racing, and not in the good way anymore. Jason's face was still a deep shade of red, but then he smiled. This little smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, and I swear I wanted to throw something at him. "You might want to hang a sign or something," he said, backing out of the room with his hands up like he was surrendering. "Just saying." And then the little idiot laughed, like a full-on laugh, as if he hadn't just walked in on the most embarrassing moment of my life. He closed the door behind him, and I could hear him running down the stairs, still laughing to himself. I just sat there, completely stunned. My face was on fire, my heart was pounding, and I felt like I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out. But then, this is the part that surprised even me. I realized that the whole thing had, I don't know, affected me in a way I wasn't expecting. Because as I sat there, replaying what just happened, I couldn't stop thinking about the look on his face. That moment when he froze, his eyes wide, his mouth open, it was burned into my memory. And instead of feeling mortified, I felt this weird spark. Like he saw me. Not just physically, but in this vulnerable, unfiltered moment. And as much as I hated to admit it, that turned me on even more. The embarrassment was still there, sure, but it was mixed with this electric thrill that I couldn't shake. My brain kept going back to him standing in the doorway, the way his expression shifted from shock to amusement. It was like the tension between us had hit a boiling point, and now there was no going back. I tried to shake it off, to focus on literally anything else, but it was useless. The image of him standing there was seared into my brain, and every time I thought about it, that spark turned into a full-on fire. I spent the next couple of hours just pacing around my room, trying to calm down and make sense of what I was feeling. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that something had changed. This wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was about him. Jason, the kid I grew up with, the guy who used to annoy the crap out of me, the friend I hadn't seen in years. I couldn't deny it anymore. I wanted him. And not just in some abstract, fantasy way. I wanted him. The whole next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. Like no matter what I did, I wasn't just thinking about the embarrassment anymore. It was thrilled. Jason, on the other hand, was acting like nothing had happened. He was totally normal, cracking jokes at breakfast, scrolling on his phone while my mom talked about some new recipe she wanted to try. It was like the whole thing didn't even faze him. Meanwhile, I was sitting there, barely able to make eye contact, feeling like I was going to combust. I spent most of the day avoiding him, which wasn't easy in a house that small. I helped my mom with laundry, caught up on some emails, and tried to distract myself with a book I'd been meaning to finish. But no matter what I did, my mind kept drifting back to him. Then late in the afternoon, my dad called me into the living room. He and my mom were sitting on the couch, looking like they were about to drop some kind of news. "We're heading out tonight," my dad said. Your grandparents need some help with a few things, so we're driving over there. We'll probably stay late, but we'll be back first thing in the morning. We'll celebrate your return properly tomorrow, okay?" I nodded, trying to look normal, even though my heart was suddenly racing. Jason was sitting on the floor across the room, flipping through a magazine. My dad called out to him next. "Jason, you're in charge while we're gone, all right? Don't burn the house down." Jason looked up and grinned. "No promises, but I'll try." My mom laughed, and they started grabbing their things to head out. Within 10 minutes, the house was quiet again. It was just me and Jason. At first, I tried to play it cool. I stayed in my room, scrolling through my phone and pretending I wasn't hyper-aware of every sound he made. I could hear him moving around downstairs, the click of dishes as he grabbed something from the kitchen, the soft hum of the TV as he settled in to watch something. But the more I sat there, the more restless I felt. The events of last night were still fresh in my mind, and my body was practically buzzing with tension. And honestly, I wanted more. It was like some kind of switch had flipped in me. I wasn't thinking about whether it was a bad idea or what might happen if things got awkward. All I knew was that I wanted him, and I wasn't going to let myself overthink it this time. I waited until it got dark, the house quiet except for the faint sound of the TV downstairs. Then, when I couldn't take it anymore, I made my move. I crept out of my room and padded down the hall to Jason's room. The door was slightly ajar, and when I peeked inside, I saw him lying on his bed, fast asleep. He was on his side, his back to the door, one arm tucked under his pillow. For a second, I hesitated. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might wake him up. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt this surge of courage, or maybe recklessness, take over. I slipped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of his desk lamp. I could hear his slow, steady breathing, and it made my own breathing hitch. Carefully, I climbed onto the bed and lay down next to him. My body was practically vibrating with nerves, but I couldn't stop myself. I mirrored his position, lying on my side with my back to him, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. For a moment, I just lay there, letting the tension build. The quiet, the stillness, it was intoxicating. My mind was racing, but my body knew exactly what it wanted. I started to move, just slightly, shifting closer to him. My hand brushed against his, and he stirred a little in his sleep, but didn't wake up. My heart was in my throat, but I kept going. And then he turned over. His eyes opened slowly, blinking as he tried to make sense of what was happening. When he saw me, his face went from sleepy confusion to pure shock. "Tiffany, what are you doing?" His voice was rough, groggy from sleep. I didn't say anything at first. I just reached out, grabbing his hand and placing it against my waist. His hand was warm, strong, and for a second, he just froze, staring at me like he couldn't believe what was happening. "It's your fault," I said softly, my voice barely more than a whisper, "for coming into my room without knocking." He looked at me, his expression a mix of confusion and something else, something I couldn't quite place. But then slowly he relaxed. His hand moved on its own, sliding against my side, and I saw the moment he gave in. For a moment, everything felt surreal. Jason's hand hovered over me, unsure, shaky even. I could feel the hesitation in his touch, the kind of nervous energy that comes when someone's walking into completely uncharted territory. His palm rested gently, his fingers trembling slightly. At first, I wasn't even sure if he was going to go through with it. He looked at me with this mix of confusion, fear, and curiosity. I could see the wheels turning in his head, probably wondering if he should bolt, laugh it off, or lean into whatever this was. And honestly, I could barely keep myself composed. But then something shifted. I gave him a small nod, silently telling him it was okay, that I wanted this, that he didn't need to overthink it. That little bit of reassurance seemed to be all he needed. His hand started to move, cautious at first, like he was testing the waters. His fingers grazed over my side, warm and firm, but still hesitant. I could see the uncertainty in his face, but there was also determination. He wanted to do this right, even if he didn't fully know what he was doing. And somehow, that made it even more intense. His hand brushed against my skin, and I couldn't help but let out a shaky breath. It wasn't just the physical sensation. It was the way he was putting so much effort into it, the way he was clearly trying to read me, to figure out what felt good and what didn't. There was something so raw, so vulnerable about it. I kept my hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breaths. His skin was warm under my palm, and I could feel the faint texture of muscle beneath. His chest was broad, solid, and I couldn't help but notice the faint veins running along his arms, visible even in the dim light. Jason's nervousness started to fade as he got more into it. His movements became more confident, more deliberate. He wasn't just fumbling around anymore. He was paying attention, watching my reactions, and adjusting accordingly. And honestly, he was doing a great job. I couldn't help but smile a little, even as my body tensed with anticipation. There was something so endearing about the way he was approaching this, like he was discovering something entirely new, but he was putting his whole heart into it. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were moments where his inexperience showed, where he hesitated or fumbled slightly. But the effort he was putting in, the way he was so clearly focused on making this a good experience for both of us, it made up for everything. And for me, it was overwhelming in the best way. Every sensation felt amplified, like my entire body was tuned into him. The room felt hotter, the air thicker, and I could feel this electric current running between us. It was so much more than I expected, so much more intense than anything I'd felt in a long time. Jason's confidence grew with each passing second. His movements became more fluid, more sure. I could see the change in him, the way his fear started to melt away, replaced by something bolder. And as for me, I was fully lost in the moment. It was like everything else faded away. The awkwardness, the hesitation, the fear of what this might mean, all of it disappeared. All that mattered was him and the connection we were building, the way we were both fully present in this moment. And then it happened. That rush, that wave of pure sensation that left me breathless. It was 5 times stronger than anything I'd experienced before, maybe because it wasn't just physical. It was emotional too. It was the way he looked at me, the way he was so clearly trying, the way we were both stepping into something completely new together. I let out a shaky laugh, my forehead resting against his. "You're better at this than I thought," I teased softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He grinned, a mix of pride and relief washing over his face. "I didn't think I'd survive this," he admitted, his voice just as quiet. We both laughed, the tension between us dissolving into something warmer, something lighter. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about what had happened. It was about him. That, as if on instinct, I leaned in. It wasn't some grand, dramatic move. It was subtle, slow. I wanted to give him a chance to back away if he needed to. But he didn't. His eyes flicked down to my lips, and that was all the encouragement I needed. Our lips met softly at first, almost testing the waters. His were warm and surprisingly soft, and there was this hesitancy to his kiss, like he was still unsure if this was really happening. But as the seconds ticked by, that hesitancy started to melt away. He tilted his head slightly, pressing into the kiss with just a little more confidence, and I felt that familiar rush of heat flood through me. I don't know what it was about Jason. Maybe it was the fact that this felt so forbidden, so unexpected. But everything about him in that moment was driving me wild. I could feel his inexperience in the way he kissed me, the way he was clearly figuring it out as he went. But that just made it better somehow, more genuine. I decided to take control. I pushed him back gently, guiding him until he was lying flat on the couch. His eyes widened for a second, but he didn't resist. I climbed on top of him, straddling his waist, and I couldn't help but smile at the way he looked up at me, half nervous, half amazed, like he couldn't believe this was really happening. "Relax," I murmured, running my hands down his chest. His shirt had ridden up slightly, revealing a sliver of toned skin and the faint lines of his abs. I trailed my fingers along that line, feeling the way his muscles tensed under my touch. He started to say something, but I cut him off with another kiss. This one was deeper, more intense. I could feel him relax beneath me, his hands tentatively moving to rest on my hips. The kiss grew hungrier, more passionate. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling slightly, and I felt him shudder beneath me. His hands tightened on my hips, and for a second, I wondered if he was finally going to take charge. But he didn't. He just looked up at me, completely lost in the moment, letting me lead. And honestly, I loved it. There was something so empowering about being the one in control, about guiding him through this experience and watching the way he responded. His breath hitched every time I moved, every time I shifted my weight or trailed my fingers along his skin. It was intoxicating knowing I had this kind of effect on him. That seemed to give him a little boost of confidence because his hands started to move more freely, exploring. I could feel the change in him, the way he was finally starting to let go of his nerves and just enjoy the moment. And for me, it was incredible. Every touch, every kiss, every little movement, it all felt heightened, more intense. I don't know if it was the forbidden nature of it, the adrenaline, or just the fact that it was him, but I felt like I was on fire. Our kisses grew more passionate, more desperate. I could feel his heartbeat against mine, his chest rising and falling rapidly as we got lost in each other. I trailed my hands along his arms, feeling the strength in them, the way his muscles flexed under my touch. I wanted him so much, but of course, this fool nerd had no protection, and at that moment I didn't dare to. Well, you understand. So I slid down to his feet, sat on my knees, and did what I did. All right, here's a revised version that maintains a respectful and safe tone while still reflecting intimacy. The way things unfolded felt like a dance, one that was both unfamiliar and new for both of us. As I adjusted my position, I noticed how his body responded, almost like he was experiencing this kind of connection for the first time. There was this mix of curiosity and hesitation in the way he moved, but also an undeniable sense of vulnerability. I shifted down and knelt beside him, not out of any rush, but because I wanted to make sure he felt comfortable. Everything about the moment felt like it was happening in sync, with a sense of trust slowly building between us. There were no expectations, just the understanding that we were exploring this moment together, feeling each other out, literally and emotionally. His reaction seemed genuine, a little nervous, but also really into the experience. It was clear that this was something new for him, and I respected that. I didn't push him, just allowed the moment to unfold naturally, with no pressure on either side. In these kinds of moments, the physical part is only a small piece of it. What really stood out to me was how we communicated through our actions, ensuring that there was always respect for boundaries and mutual understanding. When it was all over, I stood up, still a little dazed, and turned to Jason. Without thinking, I asked, "Are you a virgin?" He didn't look away, just met my eyes and said, "No." His voice was steady, but there was something about the way he said it that made me pause, like he was almost waiting. I kept looking at him, and then he added, "Okay, you got me, sis." I didn't really process what he meant at first, too wrapped up in my own thoughts. When I left the room, everything started to hit me at once, like a slow realization of what had just happened. I felt this mix of emotions swirling around: confusion, guilt, maybe even shame. It was such a whirlwind, but also so alive, so intense. It felt real in a way I had never experienced before, not even with the best guys I'd been with. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe I shouldn't have done it, that maybe I'd crossed a line I shouldn't have. But then I kept replaying the moments in my head and the way it felt. It wasn't like anything else. I couldn't ignore that part either, the feeling that something was so right in that moment, even if now, in the aftermath, I felt sick. Sick for what I did to Jason. But at the same time, I couldn't deny how good it was. Was that okay? Was it right? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out, honestly. But what do you think? Should I feel guilty? Tell me in the comments what you think about all this.